And you would think that I knew what I was doing already, right? God damn. Let's see. Hang on one second, guys. Okay, so here's what I know. We're definitely streaming to the YouTube, but let's see. Hang on. Give me one second. Let me see if anything's happening on Facebook. Should be, but I don't see anybody logging in from there. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So Todd says we're there. Okay, cool. All right. Don't worry, Alex. Don't worry. Okay, everyone. Welcome to the Jeet Kune Dialogues. This is episode number 361. This is our monthly Ask Me Anything. Um, yeah. Thanks for checking, Alex. We're okay, right? Facebook's working too. Okay, good. All right, cool. All right. A little glitch there to start out. So I wanted to show you something. Let me see if I can get it on screen here. It's actually pretty funny, right? Is it this one? I think it's this one. Let me get it on screen for you. Right. This, yeah. Okay. All right. So you're not, wait, let me see if I can make it bigger. Okay, good. There we go. All right. So my good friend Bob Lander says, as a JKD man, you accept the Inasano method. Sorry. As a JKD man, you accept the Inasano method as the true and valid authorized interpretation of JKD as such. Who are you rebelling against as far as JKD? This is so this is so ridiculous, right? Um, this is so ridiculous on a whole on a whole other kind of level, right? Okay, all right. So let me explain something to you. Okay, let's the Inosanto method. What exactly is the Inosanto method? Now, what I think Bob is talking about here is the well, Bob only knows Inasano from seminars, right? Maybe back in the 80s in Oklahoma or what have you. So I think what he's saying is that the Inasano method is what Sifudan teaches on seminar. Well, I started with Inasano in 1983, and that seminar that I went out to, he wasn't even advertised as teaching Jeet Kune. And this is 1983. So if as far back as 1983, Dan Inasano was being advertised as teaching Filipino Kali, where would people get this idea that if you go to an Inasano seminar, you're going to a Jeet Kune seminar? When the ad says we'll be teaching Filipino Kali. Now, granted, as the seminar stuff started to grow and grow, sometimes people would say that he would be teaching um, Filipino Kali, Silat, and Jeet Kune. Some people would say that. But you'd be hard pressed if you went through, and I've talked about this before. Andrew Wilson, he did a huge search, right? You would be hard pressed to find any seminar listing that said specifically and solely Dan Inasano will be teaching a Jeet Kune Do seminar. You could not find that anywhere. Why is that? Well, it's because on seminar, that was never his intention. If you know what went on behind the scenes then you would know that Inasano was like, you can't teach Jeet Kune Do on seminar because Jeet Kune Do is not a thing that can be transmitted um, in the seminar format. AKA one of the aspects of the Inasano of the seminar format is that you have a ton of people, like more than 10, like more than 20. And this is you, and so I'm talking like the Inasano seminar thing started probably, let's say, 1979, 1980. Okay, so 46 years later, in 2026, Ron Reagan and I are at the Inasano seminar for an Inasano seminar. I scan the room. There's 60 or 70 people in the room, right? That is not how you transmit Jeet Kune Do. Now, what can you do? You can give people an idea of the art, right? But you can't teach Jeet Kune Do as such. In fact, I dare say that Dan Inasano on seminar tries to give people, or has always tried to give people the essence of the art, the idea of the art. Because to really teach it, it has to be smaller format. It's got to be like in your class where there might be 20 people. If you know, then you know that the Jeet Kune Do class in the old days at the Kali Academy was even less than 20 people. Why? Because at that time, he was invested in the development of Jeet Kune Do as a fighting system. And so everything was put to the test using sparring as the crucible, using sparring as the testing method. So you can't do that on a seminar. Okay. Now there are people who will will teach a seminar which is more like a workout, and that's fine because but you'll be limited to what aspects of it you can teach. So you would probably be limited to teaching the grappling aspect like Larry Hartzell would do, or the kickboxing aspect like let's say Joe Louis. Okay, right? But for Inasano, being invested in the total development of a Jeet Kune Do student, that's something that you have to have a lot more control over it. But you can give people an idea of the art by exposing them to various elements of the art, right? So this thing that Bob was talking about, me accepting the Inasano method, there is no Inasano method. There's the Inasano approach, but this to call it the Inasano method, see, because it's like um, I have watched him change his approach over 4 decades. So if there was such a thing as the Inasano method, then that method would mean that it changes, that your approach changes as the years go by, right? Yeah, Mikey, I said let's say Joe Louis because I don't know if Joe Louis himself said that he was teaching Jeet Kune Do. That's the reason why I said it. I just looked in the comments and my good friend Mike Lee Canarek said, let's say Joe Louis. I because I wasn't sure if Joe Louis himself said that he was teaching Jeet Kune Do or if he was teaching the Joe Louis fighting method. So that's why I hesitated. You caught me on that, Mike. Right? So that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny, right? Anyhow, so Bob says, what am I rebelling against? All right, so there's a number of things, right? That as the Jeet Kune Do rebel, I rebel against. One, I rebel even within the um the Inasano clan, okay? Because I think that too many people who are followers and students of Dan Inasano pattern their movement off him. And like I've said before, if you've been with Dan Inosanto for 20 years, you've been with him since he was 70 years old. If you've been with him since for 10 years, you've been with him since he was 75 years old. Okay. So you've never seen Prime Inosanto. So you can't pattern what you do off a 70, 75-year-old guy. No, 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 no. That's not the way to do it. Okay. So you need to pattern yourself, especially if you are not 70 yourself, right? You need to pattern yourself off something. I'll use the word younger, right? But what I mean is more dynamic, right? So when I met Dan Insano, I literally met Dan Insano on Sunday, July 24th, 1983. So that was when he turned 47. So I got to see, even if it was the tail end, and with him, really tail end, really, right? 47 is not tail end for him. So I got to see Prime Inosanto. So I know what I'm talking about. And I know that you guys can understand what I'm saying also. But there are a lot of people in the Inosanto clan that take that approach. And I'm not happy with it at all. Okay. So that's why I always recommend that people seek out guys who are still actively teaching, who experience Prime Inosanto. And like I always say, we provide an opportunity. Ron Reagan and I provide the opportunity in Titans of JKD here in Miami, which comes up next weekend, right? So anyhow, so I just wanted to start out with this showing you this Bob Landers thing, right? The other thing that I wanted to mention, and I'm not going to spend too long on it, and then I'll get to what you guys have sent in. Where is it? Is this it? Let's see. Oh, no, 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 no. Um, okay, my mistake. I that one we don't need to. It was just a guy that said that I'm all talk, and I made a joke with him. I go, no, I'm not all talk, because sometimes I'm all listen, because I do two podcasts. There's a podcast where I talk to the camera, and there's a podcast where I dialogue with a partner. So he said I was all talk, so I just made a joke with him. But you guys don't need to be in on that, right? So there was a question, but I can't. I'm not going to be able to find it. But somebody said, all right, let me scroll for a second, and if I see it, or did I take a picture of it? I might have taken a picture of it. Hang on a sec, because okay, there we go, I think I can pull it up, right? So here was the question: Does it appear? Does the fact that it appears that Bruce was on hard drugs affect people's view of him and his art? Does it tarnish JKD, or do the great things he did martial arts wise outweigh the drug use? And I would say, in my experience, the so called drug letters, the revelation of the drug letters, didn't really do anything at all to tarnish Bruce Lee's image. It's almost as if um, so much great stuff about Bruce Lee, by Bruce Lee, from Bruce Lee was already out there, that the revelation that he might have been using cocaine, people were like, oh, okay, well, wow, interesting. And then they moved on, right? I think it would only be, it might only be, people who fantasize that Bruce Lee is their dad or something, right? No, because no, you might even forgive your father for something like that if you found out that when he was younger, right, he did drugs. I don't know. It's just, but there are these people who um they take they I mean, they are fantasists, right? And they take stuff so seriously. I mean, even like my good friend Bob Landers, right? Bob Landers and my other good friend Richard Torres. Sometimes the way they behave, it's almost as if Dan and Asano teaching Filipino Kali on a seminar that they attended was like a personal affront, right? They were like personally insulted by the fact that he did that, right? So anyhow, so yeah, so I don't think that that Bruce Lee's drug use did much of anything at all, right? Okay, all right. So let me. There's a couple other things that I need to talk to you about, but let me see if anybody sent anything in. So Bucky says, "How is your?" Wait, I lost it here. I lost it. Hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. I shouldn't have looked down at my phone. How has your experience been attending in Asano seminars in recent years? Well, see, okay, yes, see, so this is the thing, like I was just saying, right? Um, People are not pushing themselves. A lot of the Inasano students, when I see them in front of him, they're not pushing themselves. They are they're talented, they're they're skilled, but it's look, man, sometimes this is what I want to say to them, right? This is what I want to say. In fact, okay, so I'll give you an example. When you're at seminar and let's say you're doing something that involves three count boxing combinations or something, right? And so you got to do the overhead and the uppercut and the overhead. There are people who will do the widest, biggest swinging overhead uppercut overhead thing, and because he's a nice guy, Inosano will let it fly, right? He's also 90 years old. I, on the other hand, am watching that and I want to open up and say, Sifu, do you want it that wide from left field or do you actually want it to be a little bit tighter? Because some of these people don't seem to understand, right? Now, it is easier to feed the overhead, uppercut, overhead, big and wide, but that's not the proper technique of it. So I am almost about to say, come on, guys, you're demonstrating in front of Dan Inosano. Tighten it up. But see, they get away with it because he's a nice guy. So one day at an Inosano seminar, I just might do something like that and go, you guys don't understand who you're demonstrating in front of. You better make it look as good as you can. I just might. Or I'll just keep the peace. Okay. Anyhow, so that's one of the experiences, Bucky. Um, the other one is to watch how he puts things together, right? Um, but which is another interesting phenomenon because I still am watching how he's putting stuff together. So, for example, Ronnie and I were this time last week. We were well this time last week. We were having a Chinese restaurant and just talking our heads off, right? We were having a Chinese lunch or dinner at a Chinese restaurant, but but on Saturday during the Inosano section of the seminar, if you see my notes, right, you'll see that I'm showing where he's changing the prefix or he's changing the entry technique or what have you, even though the rest of it might be the same. And that has been, in my experience, the Inosano creation method for the longest time. But but other people, they're probably not seeing it that way at all. What they're seeing is is they're seeing it by technique, and I'm seeing it. I'm looking at it by principle, not by technique. So they're writing down specific techniques, and then if he's teaching that same series over a period of time, and they keep writing it down, and then they think, oh, this is the Inasano curriculum. Oh, this is the Inasano method. And that's where that kind of stuff starts to come from. When what he's doing is teaching by principle and just using some particular examples. But that doesn't mean that the Inasano method is comprised of just those examples. So, for example, I won't talk about JKD stuff. I'll talk about Kali for a second, right? Because Ronnie and I were working on this today. So when Sifu Dan opens up class or seminar or instructor conference, because part of the Inasano approach it has become where um, everyone is taught the same stuff, regardless of the setting. So if it's instructor conference, if it's uh, weekday classroom, weekend classroom, or if it's seminar, right? Everybody is pretty much taught the same way and the same material. It's just that depending on what event it is, you have more time. So if you have more time, you can go into more material, right? Anyhow, um, so if you take a thing like open four in double stick, inward backhand, he will show high high and high low, and he'll start you with that. And then he jumps from that high high and high low into six count, high low high. So he's going from four count to six count and whatever, whatever. But if you've been with him for a while, you know that in four count, inward backhand, there's high high, high low, low low, and low high. And then, of course, we have the secret Miami version, which I won't talk about publicly, right? In six count, it's the same, it's similar. But because he's given you the idea of the art, to a certain extent, the essence of the art, he only shows particular stuff. Well, if you go back to your school and all you teach is the particular stuff that Dan Inasano showed on the seminar, you're missing the point of what he taught. So that's an idea of what it is that I rebel against. I rebel against this lack of thinking, this lack of personal creativity, to be honest with you. And and that is replaced by gross acceptance of what Sifudan shows as the material. No. And by the way, have you ever heard of the Largusa Villabril system? No, you haven't, because it's the Villabril Largusa system. Why? Because Villabril is the instructor of Largusa. So no instructor would put his name before his teacher's name. That's why there is no such thing as the Inasano Lacoste system, because Dan Inasano would not put his name before his teacher's name. So somebody else must have come up with that Inasano Lacoste system or Inasano Lacoste method. Anyhow, right? Okay, so Bucky, that's part of what I've seen. Frank Nordquist, yes, rest in peace, Jihan J of Hapkido fame, who was in Game of Death. Right, I use that scene when people talk about Bruce Lee and grappling. I use that scene to show them that obviously he was relatively comfortable in grappling stuff, right? You know, like reversals and what have you. Hold on. So I like to use that scene to illustrate that when people talk about Bruce Lee and grappling. Um, okay, this is a long one. Todd is famous for his long questions. Do you think we as concept JKD instructors? All right, so I'm going to stop you right there, Todd. I know that in the mid 1980s or so, Dan Inosanto started using the term Jeet Kune concepts, but I personally don't use it. People will identify me because I am an Inosanto student. So they'll say that I'm a concepts instructor, but I don't I don't identify as that. Right? I don't use that label for myself, but I get what you're talking about, right? So do you think concept JKD instructors and practitioners might be part of the reason the art is fading? No, the art is not fading among the art is not fading among its practitioners. Okay? Outside of and then the Bruce Lee superstar um, has never faded among his aficionados. So the idea, how should I put this? It's kind of like when the TV show Orphan Black was airing. It was like the number one show. It's all people were talking about. And then it ended and people stopped talking about it because it's no longer topical. So Jeet Kune Do was the rage the 1980s and the 1990s until it was replaced somewhat by things that became more popular. So that's why you could say that the art has faded. It's just because you don't have the same percentage of members of the public knowing about it, hearing about it, seeing about it. It's not in the magazines or what have you. So that gives the idea to, and I guess to say that it has faded is correct because it has faded away from the public psyche. But it has not faded at all for a person like me or for a person like you, Todd. And then there's thousands of us. There are thousands of people like us. So it has never faded in that respect. But in terms of being topical, yes. So I'm not sure. So let me finish reading your question, right? Maybe it's possible that we're the ones who drifted too far while original JKD instructors and practitioners stayed focused strictly on Junfan Kung Fu rather than branching into other arts. No, 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 no. See, now I get more why you said JKD concepts, right? Because it's like if you're a Jeet Kune Do concepts guy, it means that you train in other arts, right? Okay, but the more that we learn about Bruce Lee himself and what he trained in, we find out that he himself um, literally trained in other kung fu styles, then trained himself, right? So when I say literally trained, I mean had someone coaching, teaching, instructing, showing him whatever verb you want to use for it. We find out that Bruce Lee spent time with other people beyond Yip Man. And then we know that Bruce Lee would look at things in a magazine or if he had film of it or in a book or whatever, and he would teach himself using that stuff as a source. So this idea that if you go beyond it. Look, it's like this, right? Let's say to make Jeet Kune Do, you take A, B, C, D, E, and F. And as you train A, B, C, D, E, and F, they disappear and become just Jeet Kune Do. So you put the product, right, as Jeet Kune Do. You give it a name and you put it out there. But the people who train with you understand the process of training A, B, C, D, E, and F. So if followers of Bruce Lee, if they themselves train in G, H, I, J, K, and L, okay, right? Because remember, A, B, C, D, E, and F, the influence of that is already in the art. The idea, however, of continuing to look at other things and seeing what you could take out of them and bring into the art is still valid. So now these guys are training perhaps in stuff that Bruce Lee himself didn't train in. You're not violating Bruce Lee's rules. You might not be copying him specifically or exactly, because you're doing G, H, I, J, K, and L. He did A, B, C, D, E, and F, right? But you're still following the same principles. It's still the same process. The original guys, if they do something that, like they say that you don't have to go outside of Jeet Kune Do in order to evolve your Jeet Kune Do. You can stay inside of Jeet Kune Do. Okay, that's true. And in doing that, guess what? They might end up in the same spot as someone who looked at another art. So, in other words, let's say an original, and I'll use those terms because they apply to the discussion. So, an original Jeet Kune Do guy decides to take an honest look at grappling because he says, in today's world, um, stand up, standing grappling is not all you need. You need to have some ground fighting skill. So, if you're going to do the kind of research that Bruce Lee would do, so dig this, right? If Bruce Lee in his time era wanted to research grappling methods, he would have to go get a book on grappling of his era, right? Wouldn't he? So if you went to get a book on grappling of today's era, you would probably end up with a book on Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. You see? So so the original Jeet Kune Do guy is looking at a book on Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and the JKD concepts guy is taking Brazilian Jiu Jitsu class under an instructor. They're doing the same thing. They're in pursuit of the same JKD ideal, which is to be well rounded in the four skills of empty handed combat. They're just using a different approach. One group influenced by Inasano, because Inasano, in my estimation, likes sometimes to have to take the pressure off himself as being the guy in charge and go submit himself, right, as a student to somebody else, so that then he could just have it all handed to him or what have you, right? Okay, so Jeet Kune Do concepts, original Jeet Kune Do, everybody's pursuing the same ideal. They just happen to be doing it a little bit differently. If an original Jeet Kune Do guy said, I want to look at knife fighting because there's knuckleheads out there in the world that will pull a knife on you. So I'm going to research it. So I'm going to get a video on knife fighting. I'm going to get a book on knife fighting of today's era. Now, you might have one of those who goes, "No, I want a knife fighting book from the 1940s." You might find one of those. Okay. And guess what? He might benefit from that, right? But if he's living in the 21st century, might make more sense to get a book from the 21st century. I don't know, right? I can't speak for them. Anyhow, but he will now be doing it from a video, privately, publicly, whatever, from a video on a book. Whereas a Jeet Kune concepts guy, again, influenced by Inasano, might just go study Filipino Kali. They're still doing the same thing, right? Ted Wong did not go outside of Jeet Kune, but Ted Wong looked at wrestling. Ted Wong looked at Ted Wong even looked at Filipino stick fighting, but he didn't look at it the way I would. Ted Wong looked at the application of it, right? Not, he didn't go through the phases that I went through, like, learn the coordination drills and then do cinco teros or doce teros or whatever, right? And then learn the sombrada, and all this. No. Ted Wong went to the sparring, right? Take the soft stick and work attack by combination, work attack by drawing with the stick in your hand, which, by the way, I don't know if I said this publicly, all of you who are attending Titans of JKD, this is one of the reasons why we called it Titans of JKD Imas, because in one of his sessions, this is exactly what Cas Magda is going to be doing. Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune's 5 ways of attack in stick fighting. So bring your soft sticks if you are attending Titans and you happen to hear me yelling about it, right? Okay, all right. So Todd, I hope that answered what you were thinking about, right? Okay, what's this? I've heard you say that some instructors who once taught Jun Fan Kung Fu now primarily teach Muay Thai. So I don't know if I actually said who once taught, okay? As in they no longer do teach it. But what I've seen on some people's class schedule is kickboxing not identified as to what method of kickboxing it is. I've seen variations on the theme. Some do not have a Jeet Kune class listed at all, but they do have something that says kickboxing, and then they might have a Muay Thai class or a Jiu Jitsu class. Then there are some who will have a Jeet Kune class listed, or it might be Jun Fan JKD, right? In addition to Muay Thai and Jiu Jitsu. So what, and that, yeah, and it might matter if they at least acknowledge that they came up through Jeet Kune. Does it really matter if they no longer teach Jun Fan Kung Fu? Um, if 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 people have reached the point where to them there's no point in teaching JKD, um, then there's no point for them in teaching JKD. So we just move on. If we know them personally, or even if we don't know them personally, if we know about them, we know their background, we know their history. But if for themselves they have no interest in talking about Jeet Kune, they have no interest in promoting Jeet Kune, they have no interest in discussing their roots in JKD or whatever, then that's up to them, right? Wouldn't be the way I would do it, but that's up to them. So what are we gonna do? Um, Brooks Long wants to know what's new in the JKD world. New books, courses, something cool. Um, So Joseph S. Harrison has a new book coming out. He didn't tell us exactly when. Um, Pat Finley's Deconstructing Jeet Kune book is relatively new. In terms of courses, I think Burt Richardson might have Junfan JKD. It's not for the streets. I don't think he named it Junfan JK, but I think, oh man, he might have something. He might have something, Brooks. But I'm talking to Brooks Long. He knows everything that's out there that's being offered. So I'm sure if Bert has no, Bert said that he's been trying to get the JKD program out for the longest time, but it's not finished. I think that's where we're at with that. So, not a whole lot new in the JKD world as of right now, right? Um, Scorch says that he saw. Oh yeah, Scorch, you told us this last time, I think, right? That guys are fighting at Douglas Road. So you're glad he's glad I carry sticks. That's because somebody put up something. Oh, Ed Stahl put up a video complaining about the lack of um, presence when people demonstrate their Filipino Kali, and he alluded to the fact that people always say, "Oh, who's gonna have two sticks?" Right? And I made a comment on the YouTube that if I get into a fight, it will probably be when I'm outside of my house. And even when I go to Publix, I carry. Okay. When I'm on the train going by Douglas Road, as Scorch is talking about here, if I'm on the train, I'm more than carrying. Right? So I would have two sticks if something happened to me outside of my house, right? Bucky wants to know what are some of my latest experiments with regards to training methodology and technique. Um, I'm looking at a decreased dependence on the use of focus mitts. Um, I'm looking at different ways to hit. Instead of thinking that boxing, right? So this is where, Bucky, I came up with this statement. All boxing is punching, but all punching is that was that statement? No, all box. Wait, now I can't remember. It's two statement. Bucky, you got me stumped. It might have been something like all boxing is punching, but all punching is not boxing, or something like that. But there's a second statement where there's a difference between punching and striking. And even if you're talking about using your hand, there's a difference between punching and striking. So in training methodology and technique, that's one of the things that I'm looking at. And but the the way you use the focus mitt is definitely something that has been that we're working on, right? Ramon Diaz says, "I wish I could have met Dan in his prime." Yeah, I wish I could have met him, you know, in like Chris Kent did in '73, but I was 4 years old, right? Wouldn't have made sense. Um, Mike says you met Dan in '83 when he was 47. Wait, I'm sorry. Yeah, when he was 47. I met Joe in '93 when he was 50, both in their teaching prime. You are to Dan what I am to Joe. And we were great. Ah, that's very sweet of you, Mike. Yeah, but yeah, that it's a very similar past, my friend. Very similar past, right? Um, Brooks, again, I apologize. I'm slow into scrolling, so it created an awesome collectible from the auction house, and I have it. I don't know what you're talking about, right? Alex Hausman says you're going to need to market prime Inisano ribs and beef besides the coffee blend. Alex, you're too funny. You're too funny. Um, Magazine Retriever says that's a fun. There's a funny Kempo joke. How many Kempo students does it take to change a light bulb? 100, one to change it, and 99 to say that's not how Mr. Parker would do it. Yeah, well, change Kempo to JKD, change Mr. Parker to Bruce Lee, and you got Jeet Kune right there, right? Gabe Alonso, what's up? What's up? I was just in your neck of the woods, over by U Health Jackson on my way down from Pompano. All right. John, what's happening up in the mountains, right? Um, okay, Todd says, I think it may be time for some of us in the concepts camp to step away from other arts and refocus solely on Junfan Gung Fu. This has nothing to do with Goro Inasano, who has always taught the art separately. I'm only speaking for those of us who feel most connected to Junfan. Well, I mean, Todd, I'm not going to tell you, what to do. Whatever you feel like doing is entirely up to you. But when you so I watched the videos that you did, Todd, on the wooden dummy and that stuff. So I think I have a decent understanding of what you're referring to when you call it Junfan Gung Fu. My only caution is, if okay, I've said this before, but I got to say it again. If Bruce Lee started calling his art Jeet Kune Do on a particular day, the day before, if he was calling it Junfan Gung Fu, there's no difference in what he was doing. So if when you say Junfan Gung Fu, you're talking within that context, right? But if when you say Junfan Gung Fu, you're talking about a reversion to the Taki Kimura era, where there's no athletic position for the Baizhong. It's instead more steeped in the Wing Chun way. Then no, I don't think that we should revert to that. But if you mean the full expanse, if when you say Junfan Gung Fu, you're talking about the full expanse of Bruce Lee training, then yeah. But no. But then if you mean Junfan Gung Fu, we should still train on the dummy. We should still train the trapping hands and that type of stuff. Yes, but not if you mean go all the way back to Seattle and do what they were doing in 1962. No, that I don't agree with. I just mentioned the trapping. Let me go back to Bucky's question about what's new for me in training methodology and what have you. I had a radically different approach to trapping even before 3 or 4 years ago. 3 or 4 years hence, um, trapping no longer has the relevance that it used to have. So when it had I mean, it still has relevance. When it had more relevance to me, I still rebelled against the way that it was usually trained and demonstrated and portrayed. And then, as its relevance faded, my approach to it is still even a little bit more radical. Okay, so that's an answer to Bucky's question, right? I have to show you this. Ray McKinnon says Dwight Woods is the best. Thank you, Ray. I appreciate that. Right. Mike Wharton says I'm a Ted Wong JKD person. Also went to some nucleus events back in 2000, 2001. Having said that, um, total respect for everything you do. Right. Thank you, Mike. Met a guy from your academy back in the day who trained with our group in Dallas for a while, and he was really good. His name was Bill. Ah, yes, Bill. I think that was Bill Lucas, right? Yeah, Bill would have been good even if he had not trained with me, Mike. Right? So that's all credit to him, right? But thank you for those kind words, right? Tim Becker says, "Oh, that tighten it up thing." Well, yes, yes. So Tim, here's what I'll do. Next time I'm at the Inasano Academy, when I yell at somebody, I'm gonna yell at them and I'm gonna run behind you to protect me. Okay? Right? Bone says, absolutely tighten it up, and you should say something. It's a disservice if you don't. I know, John. I want to, but Ron won't let me. I'll blame Ronnie Reagan, right? He's like, no, 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 no. Keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. We want to be welcome when we come over to the end. Oh man. Ramon says you have the right to, Dwight, because the dedication as a student of that. Yeah, to me, it's just you know, he's such a nice guy that you'll come up and I'll look at your demonstration. I'll go, man, you should be doing better. You could do better. But Dan Anasano wants to be encouraging. So he won't say, well, fix this or fix that. You know what I mean? Now, if he calls me up to demonstrate with Ron, if Ronnie doesn't look good, he'll blame me, right? Which is fine because if Ronnie doesn't look good, it is my fault because I shouldn't bring him up as my demo partner if he did right. I'm just kidding. Okay. But yeah, it I just think, especially, right? Especially if he's turning 90 this year, if he calls you up to demonstrate, my God, put on a show. Put on a freaking show. We don't know, heaven forbid, we don't know how much longer he's going to be here. So don't come up with your little paltry, soft stuff demonstrations. Work your ass off. That's my take on it. Anyhow, right? Okay. Did I get in trouble here with Timmy? The other thing about the rest of us saying we're teaching the cost system or in a sound of the cost is that we aren't qualified to teach something we don't know. We know some things, but there are only three people. I'm aware that knew the cost system, and one of them was the cost. Tim must be speaking instead of typing, so I don't understand what the heck he said. um, the cost system, right? Yeah, Timmy. Here's what we should do one day, right? Like when we go to an Indian restaurant, we should ask Sifudan, the Lacoste system. What were its components? Like, what specifically did Johnny Lacoste give you as his system, because I suspect that what we might find out is that Lacoste gave him stuff, but not as a system, right? But if you put it into a system and it came from Lacoste, you could affectionately call it the Lacoste system, but it's really you. It's really Inosano who systematized or systemized. I never know which is the right word. It's really Inosano who does that. You know, it's kind of like um if I if like I've said, this is another saying of mine, right? Dig this. Everything that I teach originated with Inosano, but doesn't come from him. The reason why everything that I teach originated with Inosano is because he's my instructor. So when I became his student, that's my origin story. But as a student of Dan Inosano, if 40 years later, what you're teaching originated with him, you've not done right by him. You see? So there's a subtle difference. So I think that if we were to ask him, so for example, the Lacoste drills for offense and defense, the Lacoste stick drills for offense and defense, those might be stuff that came from him. Ali Bang Bang, um, 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 Dawat, whatever. I can't even remember them now, right? But that type of stuff, right? Um, the technique of Floretti, that stuff might have come from Inosano. I mean, from Lacoste. But when Inosano starts to put it together in order to teach it, it wasn't necessarily taught to him that way. So he's making the system. But because the stuff comes from Lacoste, you might, like I said before, affectionately refer to it as the Lacoste system. But not really. It's Inosano putting it together, but Lacoste is the source. So it originated with Lacoste, but it doesn't come from him. Similarly, with some stuff that he teaches in, like, let's say, like JKD kickboxing or what have you, originated with Bruce Lee, but doesn't come from Bruce Lee. You see? Because if it came from Bruce Lee, we should be able to find it in Bruce Lee's notes. But we don't, do we? What do we find in Bruce Lee's notes? Study how to counter the left stancers or the right stancers 1-2. That is something that you could find in his notes. Study how to counter. Study how to use grappling as an attack, as a defense, as a counter. You could find that in Bruce Lee's notes. Well, if Inosano goes on to study those things and develops the catch shoulder roll against the 1-2, it originated with Bruce Lee, but it doesn't come from Bruce Lee. So you can label it Jeet Kune training because of its origin, but the development of it is a different story, right? Okay. I have no idea what I was talking about there. Um, those guys are full of. They say that again, Brooks. I'm slow. I'm late with the scrolling. They go out and train with Bill Superfoot, and they train with Joe Louis, and they train with other people. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't understand why. I guess if a guy criticizes Inosano for training in Kali, for training in Silat, for training in Well, they wouldn't criticize him for training in Wing Chun because Bruce Lee trained in Wing Chun, right? But they criticize him for training, like Bob Landers would say, in tribal arts, right? Southeast Asian tribal arts. They'll criticize him for that. But as Jeet Kune Do people themselves, like Brooks just said, they'll train with Bill Wallace, they'll train with Joe Louis. So they're training with other people, but they criticize Inosanto for training with other people, I guess because of what he chose to train, as in like he's Filipino, so he trained Filipino arts, and that's a no-no. Training with other people is fine as long as you keep it what to empty hands and not weaponry. Um, as long as you keep it to training with Westerners in Western style stuff instead of training with Easterners in Eastern style stuff. I don't know. I don't know. Right. Um, don't you think JKD absorbing other styles without credit to individual system is plagiarism, and that absorption makes JKD a non-system? Um, so, as an Inosanto guy, I give credit where and when it's due. Inosanto himself, John, got into so much trouble, you could almost say for overdoing it, right? Because it's like, instead of just doing it, it's like, well, this comes from this, and this comes from that, and this comes from this other thing, instead of just doing it and not labeling it at all, right? So I think as an honorable martial artist, he wanted to give credit where and when credit was due. The absorption aspect is because JKD as a finished system never existed. Too many holes in it. That's why I have said before, your investigation, applying the Jeet Kune Do principle of the search for truth in combat, could lead you away from the unfinished system that is Jeet Kune Do into a system which was finished. You see, that's actually what could happen. And then that changes your aspect completely, changes your outlook completely. You see? So I would say that in the past 3 to 4 years, my view on Jeet Kune Do, we always used to have the esoteric using no way as way, having no limitation as limitation. Jeet Kune Do, a process, not a product, that type of thing. Um, my thinking on that has been affected because I have concluded that it was not finished. And since it was not finished, we don't know where Bruce Lee might have gone. So we have to do the best that we can as Bruce Lee followers and go wherever it takes us. You see? So you could end up moving away from it in some regards. You could end up having your approach to it affected without moving away from it, right? There should be two other variables because there's always four variables. Anyhow, we don't enough of that, right? Sully says, talk about the importance of the conditioned mind as it pertains to physical and mental training for Jeet Kune Do. But Sully, I think you should talk about that. The importance of the conditioned mind. Um, you know, I think what happens sometimes is that because I talk so much, people think that I know stuff, right? That I know what I'm talking about. But remember, I'm a loudmouth with a decent memory. So the importance of the conditioned mind, like, I don't know, Suli, what you mean by the conditioned mind. You see, that's the thing. Um, you know, I need you to explain to me. But if you're talking about the importance of mindset as it pertains to physical and mental training for Jeet Kune Do, it's not just for Jeet Kune Do. It's for everything that you do. So, sometimes, look, sometimes, right? When you hear Bruce Lee say that Jeet Kune Do is nothing special, right? Or he says, take things as they come, or what have you. In that regard, see, so like Jesse Oliger, I think, put up a thing. So there's a post on Facebook. So there's a guy with a blade, and the other guy is backing away from him as he takes off his jacket and wraps the jacket. And then as the guy with the knife is moving, he does a lunging sidekick, right, and hits the guy. And then the guy keeps coming, and now he sidekicks him in the knee and drops him and stops him, right? So the idea of kicking somebody in the knee to stop them is definitely a Jeet Kune Do idea. But here's the interesting thing, right? So for me, as a Jeet Kune Do guy, I look at it and I see it expressed as Jeet Kune Do. Someone else who has not trained in Jeet Kune Do will see that and will call it a good low sidekick to the knee. Now, let's say that they trained in Hapkido. Whatever the Hapkido term is for the low sidekick, that's what they'll call it. So, what you perceive, what you label a thing, is based on your own background. So, the conditioned mind being important for physical and mental training to Jeet Kune Do, that's if we're looking at it as Jeet Kune Do people. But I could talk about the importance of the conditioned mind as it pertains to physical and mental training for percussion playing, because that's another thing that I'm into. Somebody else could talk about the importance of the conditioned mind as it pertains to physical and mental training for gymnastics. You see? So, in that way, it's not the importance of the conditioned mind for physical and mental Jeet Kune Do training. It's the importance of the conditioned mind for physical and mental training per se, right? But I would still need to know what you mean by the conditioned mind, because to me, that's just a way of saying, having the proper mindset. I'm currently reading. I don't have it here with me, but I'm. You guys might know Scott Adams, the late Scott Adams, the creator and writer of the Dilbert comics. So he passed away a couple of weeks ago, and I'm currently reading his book. I think it's called Reframe Your Brain or Reframe Your Mind or whatever. I just started it like this week, right? So it's in the bag over there. So that too is a thing about mindset. So if that's what you mean by mindset, I don't know that I could add anything to the importance, right, of that to anybody who is watching this show right now, Suli, or who is going to watch it. I think we all know how important mindset is, right, at this point, at this stage of the game. Um, Todd says, did Sifu Ted Wong dislike Guru Inasano? I never understood the politics in JKD until my first Sifu from Guru Dan's lineage asked me at a Christmas party who was in the photo. When I said Ted Wong, he told me never to mention that name again. So my first seafood from Guru Dan's lineage asked me at a Christmas party when I said Ted Wong. He told me never mention that name again. Um, well, yeah. So your Sifu is a guy who that is him demonstrating in his mind um, loyalty to Dan Inosanto. You see, and demonstrating loyalty to Dan Inosanto by saying to you, never mention Ted Wong's name, quite possibly because he heard a lot of stories about Ted Wong or about Ted Wong's attitude towards Dan Inosanto. Okay, now I don't know where he would have heard those from. I suspect that he never heard them from Dan Inosanto himself, and I suspect that I've only heard one report in all my time of Ted Wong making a disparaging remark about Dan Inosanto. I've only heard that. I've only heard about that once, right? So I think that if Ted Wong was in the habit of speaking disparagingly about Dan Inosanto on a constant and consistent basis, we would hear about it or we would have heard about it very often. So I don't think, right? But you know how one day, for whatever reason, right, you let one out, you know, and it's not particularly illustrative of how you feel 100%. It's just that one day you just said something, and maybe you even feel like if I could take that back, I would take it back. But so personally, I don't believe that Ted Wong had a huge disliking or anything for Dan Inosanto. I think that Ted Wong, in his limited um, understanding of Jeet Kune, and when I say limited, it's because remember Ted Wong came did not come from a martial art background, and so without a whole lot of other martial art stuff to inform him, his previous exposure before Bruce Lee was limited. That's what I mean by limited, right? So don't, twist your underwear, right? Anybody who hears this. So again, to do right by his instructor, Bruce Lee, Ted Wong restricted himself to just what Bruce Lee showed him, right? That's kind of like his own words. All I teach is what I got from Bruce, right? Um, in I think it's a 1993 magazine article. I think it's the first appearance of Ted Wong in like Black Belt magazine or whatever. He said that when Bruce Lee would come home to LA from Hong Kong, that he, Ted Wong, and Bruce Lee and Dan Inosanto would get together. So, that doesn't sound to me like a scenario where one guy dislikes the other guy. But I think that it's the students. So, like your instructor, who is a student of Inosanto, that's where when the stories start and the rumors start and you start choosing sides, you start picking sides. Well, I'm an Inosanto guy, so never mention Ted Wong's name to me. But see, my experience with Dan Inosanto, when Ted Wong came to Miami to do a seminar, Dan Inosanto was like, Dwight, you're going, right? And I'm like, yes, of course I'm going. He's like, good, that's my boy, because that's how we approach it, right? So for me to show loyalty to Dan Inosanto, I would go to a Ted Wong seminar. I wouldn't be like, oh, Ted Wong's coming to Miami. I would never show up. Man, please, right? No way, no way. See, because see, this is the thing, right? This is the thing. Let's imagine a scenario where Ted Wong is still alive, right? And there had never been a nucleus thing or whatever. Look, no, forget that. Nothing imaginary. Ted Wong and Herb Jackson had a key for the Inasano Academy in the 1980s. Okay? So they could open up whenever they wanted to, and they could go into the Inasano Academy and train. That's what I'll say. I'll leave it at that, Todd. Right? Um, so Ulysses says the more you look into the Tao of Jeet Kune, the more you see that it pioneered MMA. Can we honestly say that MMA did not evolve from JKD? Yes, we can honestly say that MMA did not evolve from JKD. Why? Because it was not JKD people. That's why it didn't evolve from JKD. The people who labeled it MMA, the people who started bringing um, Muay Thai training to complement jujitsu training so that they would have striking and grappling, right? So that they would have a more well rounded approach to combat sport, to combat martial art, to sport martial art, sorry, right? We're not JKD people, as far as I understand it. So that's why I would honestly say that MMA did not evolve from Jeet Kune Do. Okay? In that context. In the other context, which is that Bruce Lee espoused being well rounded and MMA espouses being well rounded, albeit for striking and grappling, um, then that is a shared common, that's a commonality between the Jeet Kune Do ideal and the MMA ideal. But then we have to take into consideration that JKD, as Bruce Lee was going along, wasn't really about a combat sport, even though the way you might move in JKD could be the way you move in a stand up encounter in MMA. But if we had to if we had to seriously discuss this, because I'm being partly facetious with this, because you know this is a thing that could turn into an argument. It really is, right? It's a thing that could turn into an argument, but there's no need for it to. Okay, it was prescient that Bruce Lee looked like an MMA guy in the fight in Enter the Dragon. Shorts, finger gloves, right? Submission. But you don't take that happy accident, that um, serendipitous coincidence, even though there's a clip of me saying that we should own MMA because of Bruce Lee. But you have to understand the context of that clip. You have to watch the whole Jeet Kune Do roundtable on the YouTube, on the Empower Online podcast channel. Watch the whole thing to understand the context. I was talking about positioning and equating, and I was talking about positioning and using the popularity of MMA to push the JKD ideal. That's what I was doing. So, right, so that I don't appear to be a hypocrite. Um, but I would not say seriously that Jeet Kune Do pioneered MMA. It was just a happy accident, right? Um, and so right, okay. But Ulysses, who will be on the Jeet Kune Dialogues next Friday. Is it next Friday? Or is it? Yeah, right? We shall discuss this further at that time, right? Um, Mike Lee says 30% of tactical Jeet Kune Do for Dragonborn is focus mitts. Cool, cool, right? Oh, okay. So now we get to what Brooks was talking about, the auction house and the drug letters. Yeah, I didn't get like official copies of the drug letters, right? But I have copies. Yeah, yeah. Well, whatever. Good for them. Alfred says in Kempo we refer to punching as hitting with the first two knuckles. Thus, striking is hitting any other way that does not employ the first two knuckles. Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting, Alfred. Because let me change words. In Wing Chun, we refer to punching as hitting with the last three knuckles. Thus, striking is hitting any other way that does not employ the bottom three knuckles. See how that works? Right? Um, Eric Gaskin says, "What's up from DC? Thanks for the four. Oh, the Bruce Lee book recommend. Oh yeah, for sure, Eric. And sorry, Eric, about the whole merchandise stuff. I still have to fix that and work on those people. Um, Someone posted, "Don't bring sticks to a JKD seminar." Heck, I would bring my sticks, training blades, training guns to a basket weaving seminar. Never know what cool things will happen. Brent, you belong at Titans of JKD 5 EMAS because we will have at least single stick stuff going on. Who else knows what else, right? Like Cass Magna said to me, he goes, "Well, if I'm a Titan of Jeet Kune Do, I can teach whatever I bloody well want to teach." Right? So, yeah, right. Gabriel Alonso, I also think you're the best. Thank you, Gabe. That's right. I think what Todd, as well as Richard, mean is that all you need can be found in Jeet Kune Do, but not all of it is clear. So outside is brought in to explain. I think he means to return to searching and finding it. I solely in JKD. Um, I'm not sure how, if they say that everything is already in Jeet Kune Do, right? What does that mean? Because, and again, if you're a Ted Wong student and you say everything is already in Jeet Kune Do, did Ted Wong get taught, get shown everything in JKD? And what does that mean, everything? Because if you take weapons, now I know there are a couple sequences in Bruce Lee's fighting method against um, against the handgun and against the knife for sure, right? But that's 1967, right? When Bruce Lee took those photos. Knife fighters don't operate that way, like what those pictures depict, right? So you need to step your game up. See, and that's where the idea of Jeet Kune Do as not being fixed in time. But if you say, "I'm just teaching what Bruce gave me," that is fixed in time. And what did Bruce Lee himself say, right? Knowledge is fixed in time, whereas knowing is continual. You see? So I'm not a fan of the only what Bruce gave me. Because I don't know if Bruce gave you everything. I don't know if Bruce gave you, like they say, like the James Lee picture with the keys to unlock other styles. I don't know if Bruce Lee gave Ted Wong the keys to unlock other styles. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Maybe he did, but Ted Wong was not interested in other styles. Ted Wong was very happy to practice what he had trained with Bruce Lee, right? Or train what he had practiced with Bruce Lee and pass that on to people who wanted to learn from him. More power to them, right? Um, I don't understand what they mean when they say everything is in Jeet Kune Do. Coming from that, from if they're talking about physical technique, if they're talking about mindset, like Suli's question was about, right? If they're talking about mindset, then the approach, the attitude of openness, the attitude of um, continuing to learn, well, that I would agree with. But if they say, well, yeah, you want to continue to learn, but in continuing to learn, you have to stay within the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, or you have to stay within Bruce Lee's notes or whatever. I don't know, because Bruce Lee was only 32 years old. I don't know that he made enough notes to guide me for the rest of my life, right? So I might have to go do my own research and what have you, right? But yeah, I kind of get what you mean. But go slower when you're demoing your teaching. Oh, yes. But if you're demoing, right? You go faster, right? Yeah. Uh, isn't the JKD definition confusion in part due to the Zen influence that Bruce Lee included in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do? Oh, for damn sure. For damn sure. Them Zen people, man. What is the sound of one hand clapping? There is no sound. One hand can't clap, right? You know, using no way as way. Whoa, 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 whoa. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. You can't just go, well, I'm Jeet Kune Do. I use no way as way. Oh, really? Really? How? How do you do that? When people hit you with that kind of esoteric stuff, right? Ask them. See, because you got to remember, a lot of the stuff. When Cass told me that, I forget what percentage it is, but that so much of the Tao came from Suzuki's Zen book, and then you find out more and more of the sources and what have you. You realize there is no way, right? There's no way that those things were meant for publication. That's just Bruce Lee writing out stuff that sounds cool to him. And he understands what he means by it, right? But then after he dies accidentally, and then you try to teach from notes that he made for himself, nah, not at all. So yes, um, we all have to come up with definitions for Jeet Kune Do that are accurate within the premises of Jeet Kune Do, right? Within the guiding principles and what have you of Jeet Kune Do. So you can't come up with your own definition that violates those things, but it has to be unconfusing, right? Um, and not with a whole lot of esoterica and what have you, because that ain't gonna sell. That's not gonna work at all, right? So yes, I would agree that it's the Zen and perhaps even the Krishnamurti type stuff that lends to the confusion. Might not have caused it 100%, but definitely lends to the confusion. Right. Tim says that Lacoste insisted that Inosanto train with others first. Certainly had a very different approach. Ah, okay, cool. right? Ricard says, 100% agree. Unless my teacher wants me to do full speed, my best to make a point of a specific thing. Besides that, I totally agree. I guess he's talking about like demonstrating and what have you, right? Um, Ulysses says Floretti is a common technique in other Kali system. Well, the reason why the reason why I said Floretti when we were talking about Lacoste is because in the stick drills um, for offense and defense, one of them is Floretti to Dagat, right? That's listed as part of the Inasano. That's listed as part of the Lacoste stick drills, Floretti to Dagat. So that's why I mentioned it. That take for example the Floretti, right? Um, Not to say that it doesn't exist in other systems. I was just using that as an example because again, specifically Lacoste stick drills for offense and defense. But here's the thing: how do we know that that which was labeled Lacoste stick drills for offense and defense is actually not a compilation, right? That Sifu Inasano put together himself. But then to give it more juice, he says it's the Lacoste stick drills for offense and defense, right? Because, well, if I ascribe its creation to my teacher, people will take it more seriously than if I say, no, 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 no. I came up with these. This is my stuff, right? I don't know why he would think that we wouldn't take it as seriously, you know, right? Um, Gabriel said, I'm trained in the wood system. Shut up. Oh my God. Right. Okay. We kind of know where Bruce Lee might have gone or have, in a way, an educated guess. You get that feeling after years of training with Guru Dan, don't you? No, I don't. No, I don't. Training within Asano does not give me any idea of where Bruce Lee might have gone. I'll tell you why, Ulysses. They're completely different people. Don't take this the wrong way, but what you're doing is imposing or imparting a romantic idea onto a romantic imaginary, right, idea onto a real thing. By that I mean Dan Inosanto, I like to refer to him as being famous for being Bruce Lee's premier disciple, right? Premier disciple is a phrase I came up with. I didn't take that from anybody else. It doesn't mean that there's nobody else who uses it, but I have always referred to him as Bruce Lee's premier disciple. Now, I think he's cool. I think he's one of the coolest cats that I've ever come across. Okay? So, as his student, and I think he's cool, I start saying, you know, I think if you watch Inasano, you kind of know where Bruce Lee might have gone, or you kind of have an educated guess about where Bruce Lee might have gone. No, not at all. Not even close. Because Dan Inasano, his approach, the kind of man that he is, the kind of human being that he is, it's not like Bruce Lee. So I don't think so. That kind of thinking, Ulysses, is what in some people leads to them saying stuff like Bruce Lee would have trained with the Gracies, or Bruce Lee would have trained with the Machados. Why? because Dan Inosanto did. You see, Bruce Lee might have gotten into the sticks, right? Into Filipino martial art. Why? Because Dan Inosanto did. You see, it's where people come up with all these crazy ideas that Bruce Lee did train in Kali with Inosanto for an extended period, right? He had deep training in it. It goes beyond Inosanto. I remember I should have saved it, but I remember a guy one time saying Bruce Lee probably got his black belt under Jean LaBelle, because you know how LaBelle says that Bruce Lee trained with him for about 2 years. And the guy said Bruce Lee probably got promoted to black belt in 2 years under Jean LaBelle because Bruce Lee was so talented and gifted. That's just a love of Bruce Lee leading a guy to make a claim. You see? So I think Ulysses, and I say this with the warmest of intentions, because I don't want to make you I don't want to make you upset or anything, but I think what you're doing, and you can draw me over the coals next week when we talk if I'm wrong about this, but I've seen it before, and it is something that I guard against in my own mind, but it's easy for me because my teacher, Dan Inosanto, has often mentioned about how his personality and Bruce Lee's personality are quite divergent. You see? So hearing it from him, I would never think that after years of training with Dan Inosanto, you kind of have an idea where Bruce Lee might have gone. Not at all. Not at all. Bruce Lee didn't go anywhere on a regular basis, on a repeated basis, to study under anyone else. That was not his thing. Dan Inosanto did that. And if he could, he'd probably still be doing it. But anyhow, right? So you say it is unfinished, Alex says. I think they call to finish it yourself from within JKD. Well, I don't know how they do that, Alex. I don't know how they call to finish it from within themselves. Yeah, they call to finish it yourself from within JKD. I got to think about that one. What advice do you have to return to train at 54? Show up. 10 a.m. We start at Shelter 3 at Kendall Indian Hammocks Park tomorrow. I don't care if it's in the 60s, Gabriel. Just show up tomorrow at 10 a.m. That's that's my advice, right? Yeah, Tim says that in Sifu Inasano talked about Ted Wong once or twice, and he always spoke highly of Ted Wong. Yeah, well, of course, right? Of course he would. Um, Ali versus Inoki in '73 was a real modern MMA bout. No, because it wasn't MMA. I know what you mean, right? I know what you mean. Del Monte said you could say that a lot of different systems and individuals pioneered MMA. Yeah, like Ali and Inoki in '73, right? Um, can you and those close to Sensei Paulson ask him to do a trap into grappling video series like what Sifu Hartzell did? It's worth a try. I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for Eric, right? So, what I say, right, take it with more than a grain of salt. I don't know if Eric would be particularly interested in doing that. To me, when I see Eric, you know, if you scan Facebook or the YouTube, you could probably find stuff of Eric grappling. I mean, not grappling, like doing the trap in hand stuff, right? And why can he do it? Well, because he was trained in it. But when I look at him doing it, like it's not smooth to me, right? Because I think he has moved away from stuff like that. So for him to come back at this stage of the game and do a series on trap into grappling, um, I don't know how. Well, no, I was going to say I don't know how different it might be to what Hartzell would do, but it would be different because Eric, you know, that brain, the way his brain works, um, he could come up with stuff that would blow your mind. But I don't see why he would. I don't see why he would, and I don't know what the see because right because I'm trying to remember. Okay, Sifu Hartzell probably did his stuff from like reference point and what have you. And for Eric Paulson in 2026 to stand and do reference point and do particular trapping to grappling stuff, eh, I don't think that would be his thing. I don't know that it would be well performed. Well, it would be well performed because it's Eric Paulson, but it wouldn't be top notch Eric Paulson performance, if that makes sense, right? So I would say, you know, where you could get ideas for this, Todd. Um, do you have Rick Faye's stuff from the '80s with Greg Nelson? Let me know if you do. I don't. Let me know if you do. I think Todd probably does because he owns everything, right? But let me know if you do because if you take a look at that, that has depictions, right? Or instead of Eric Paulson, maybe Greg Nelson. Maybe Greg Nelson doing a series on entering to trap into grappling might work out better, right? Um, Alex says no. Ted was lacking understanding and insight. I don't know. I wasn't there. I just Burton made a Hartzell series. Yeah, I heard about that. I've never seen it, but I did hear about that. Right. Dell says the Tao that can be explained is not the Tao. Well, damn, you know, that's good, right, for Zen and the Tao, but that ain't so good for Jeet Kune in the world of commercial martial art, right? If a guy wants to make a living, right, teaching Jeet Kune, he better be able to explain it. The esoteric, that which can be that the Tao which can be explained is not the Tao, that ain't gonna cut it. Sorry, right? But yeah. Um, Barton Wright pioneered MMA 100 years ago. I like how you guys use a modern term to describe something that happened before that term itself was in use. You see, because MMA to me, apart from standing for mass market advertising or I mean mass media advertising or mass market appeal, um, I get the idea. Mixed martial arts, yeah. So Barton Wright, whoever, all these guys, you know, the people will say it goes all the way back to pancration and what have you, right? But what MMA is today is not what those guys were thinking about. So when you guys say that they pioneered it, to me, it's more accurate if they were calling it mixed martial arts 100 years ago. Well, yes, but if it was just an idea of putting stuff together to develop well-roundedness, I would say that. I would say that that idea was pioneered by different people. I personally, but I'm a little bit weird. I wouldn't say that they pioneered MMA because MMA is not a term from 100 years ago. So obviously that means, you know, nothing, right? Jerry Beasley says using no way as way means the rule is there are no rules. Yeah, see, again, right? Right? That's like saying what my good friend Gerard Joseph says, well, let's have a discussion, but the rule is there are no absolutes. Okay. So I just impose an absolute saying there are no absolutes. So if the rule is that there are no rules, then how can that be the rule? There are no rules. So one would cancel out the other. That's why no way as way, it's not sufficient to say just that and leave it as just that. You got to go beyond. It's cute to put on a t-shirt, right? Or what have you. Might even be cute to use as the title of something. But if you're going to communicate as a JKD instructor, if you're going to have a discussion, you have to go beyond that. You can't just say to students, well, in Jeet Kune, we use no way as way and move on. The student who wants to be accepted, right, is going to agree, right? They're going to nod in assent and what have you. They don't have a clue what you mean. And if you cannot be asked to break that down, then you're doing the same thing. You don't know what you mean either. So the rule is there are no rules. That's kind of like self-cancellation, I would say, right? Um, Ryan, Ryan, Ryan. We have to talk. Okay? Constant forward pressure, ideal. Very excellent idea, but we have to talk. Okay? Um, Ulysses said the risk of the concept is understood, and common sense will take us to your explanation. My question was the idea was geared towards learning the system and learning from a top student after the master is gone type of deal. Let's pick this up next week for sure, Ulysses. Or if you make a note of this and then we can talk about it again, right? Michael Inzana says boxing is very important in Jeet Kune. Yes, boxing is very important in Jeet Kune. Also, though, Bruce Lee said something like, your goal when using boxing, I'm paraphrasing badly, your goal when using boxing in Jeet Kune isn't to become a boxer. So keep that in mind because, so for example, right, if you were to take a look at what boxers are doing these days, like my TCF teacher, my good friend and instructor, G. Anthony Joseph, drives him crazy. In fact, when we're done here, I'll probably find a boxing video to send to him to make him crazy for the weekend, right? So if you look at what boxers do today, one guy unloads on the other guy and he turtles up like this, right? That's the new defense, the wall, the shield, the whatever, right? And then when that guy gets tired, now the other guy goes. So they have this kind of rhythm, this back and forth stuff. You got guys now, top level guys, teaching how to hook, and the hook comes from way out in left field, right? The uppercuts come from way down in the earth, right? All the way up. And if you look at modern boxers and you go, well, Jeet Kune Do is important in boxing. Wait, no, I'm sorry. If you say boxing is important in Jeet Kune Do, so I'm gonna do what boxers do, then that's not how you use boxing in Jeet Kune Do at all. And now keep this in mind. Why, ask yourself this, why did Bruce Lee in the 1960s gravitate towards boxing? You have to answer that question. Why? Could it be because when compared and contrasted with classical martial art training, boxing was more fluid and more practical? Their training approach, their training methods. And since Bruce Lee was in search of that, but I don't think Bruce Lee ever intended for his people to become boxers as such. So it's, again, absorb what is useful from boxing and reject what is personally unsuitable in boxing, and then take it further. Right? But yes, it is important, but we just got to be sure how we do it. Right? Todd says, I can't find the one with Sifu Rick Fay. I've only seen the trailer. All right, Todd, message me. I think I have them, and I might be able to return the favor. Okay? All right, so just message me and remind me. Um, so Tim says that Larry Hartzell didn't necessarily do a lot of things from reference point beyond the videos, right? Okay, it's a real basic start, cool. But once you have the traps, he's going to get you out of that really fast and more into flows. Aha! Okay, right. Okay, so yeah. Well, I get what you're saying, Tim. Now, here's the thing. When you say out of the flows, I wonder if you mean specifically the hubad. Because if I go parry, place, trap, and hit, when I go parry and I go place, that's reference point. So if I do the trap as off motion two, one, two, and then I do the trap there, it's still reference point. It's not static, agreed, right? Definitely not static. So yeah, but if that's what you're talking about, it's still reference point. It's just not reference point as the reference point as the starting point. You do get to it. So it's kind of like returning to the nucleus, I guess. I don't know. I don't know about these things, right? Um, Elias Rosner says, maybe the difficulty in teaching JKD is why Inasano lineage learns so much else. No, you moron, right? The difficulty in teaching Jeet Kune Do, right? What is the difficulty in teaching Jeet Kune Do? You really think, right? Whoever you are, Elias Rosner, you really think that Dan and Asano had difficulty in teaching Jeet Kune Do? Who are you? Who are you? Right? Who are you trying to kid? You need a ton of context to understand the Tao. Get a life, man. Get a friggin' life. Get out of here. Right? 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 Maybe the difficulty in teaching Jeet Kune Do is why in Asano lineage learn so much else. No, you idiot. It's because there is no end to learning. Right? Why didn't Bruce Lee just have one book on Aikido? Huh? Right? Bruce Lee was an Aikido practitioner, but why didn't he have more than one book on Aikido? Right? Why didn't he have just one book, the best book on fencing? Huh? Why? Because learning, dummy, learning. That's what it's about. The difficulty in teaching Jeet Kune. Who the hell said that there was difficulty? There might be difficulty for somebody like you who doesn't know, doesn't have a clue about what he's doing, right? Who the hell are you, right? That's why the Inosano lineage people learn so much because learning is how you get smart, you idiot. That's how you get smart. Get the hell out of here. Ronnie Vega says it's funny how MMA fighters in UFC, I guess, used to represent themselves by style to now representing themselves with no style. Yes, that's a JKD ideal, right? Hey Johnny, what's up? Johnny, I haven't seen anything for you and Titans. What's up with that? Right? Um, can we purchase autographs from Sifu Kent, Sifu Magda, and oh man, look, will you ever have the seminar available online like Zoom? Um, man, I don't know. That's an idea, but I don't. I we would have to have so many cameras, so I'd have to have a multi-camera Zoom setup and what have you. So I don't. No, I don't think that's not well, not for Titans 5, right? It'd be too late to try to set that up. As far as the purchase of autographs, I bought a thing from who are the guys? Bruce Lee Forever, I think. Steve Kettridge and those guys. I think I bought an Inosano signature edition or something, but I don't. I mean, I've autographed stuff for people before. In fact, okay, Todd. Again, here's what I might be able to do. Um, but that no, oh shoot, I'll have to see. Right? Um, there was a kid, Alex, who came to Titans last year or the year before, and he brought his own photographs. I of me too, right? Of me, of Chris, of Cass, and had us autograph them for him. He did that. That's the closest I could get to anything with that, right? Scorch says that Richard Bastillo was a strong proponent of making boxing a primary element of the JKD he taught, and for good reason, right? Hence Bastillo's IMB academies. Well, yeah, because Richard Bastillo was a boxer himself, so it might be more important to him, okay, because it's more personally suitable. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that boxing isn't important. I'm just saying that the standard for boxing these days, I hope that nobody would take a look at modern day standards of boxing and think this is what I should be doing in Jeet Kune Do. That's what I'm saying. Bruce is also a big fan of Ali and admired his footwork. Yeah, for the movies, right? And Tim says, yes, who Bud? Okay, that's what I thought. And ABC. Yeah, okay, got it. No, I think people have difficulty understanding learning. People have difficulty understanding learning? That doesn't make sense. Tim, I hope you see this comment from Todd, right? Um, you and Todd should exchange info. See, for Asano took to JKD like a duck to water. No, I mean students have a hard time understanding. It's why you have other first generation teaching original JKD. If a student has a hard time understanding, whose fault is that? Okay? Whose fault is that? See, when you teach, part of your teaching is teaching your students how to learn. If your student has a hard, if you have 10 students right in front of you and 9 people get it and one person doesn't get it, and you go, well, too bad for you, we're moving on, uh, because the other 9 got it. Here's the problem with that. Maybe 2 of the 9 didn't really get it, but they don't want to seem dumb, so they say they didn't get it. You understand? Right? So now you move on, and really only 7 people got it. See, and this goes back to the difference between Inosano and Bruce Lee. Inosano would not be um, content to move on without that 10th person getting it. So if a student doesn't get it, you gotta be able to change what you're doing in order to help that student to get it. You see, the only way the student won't get it is if, heaven forbid, he or she just has like zero intellect. And I don't think that someone with zero intellect would ever show up and be present in a, a student environment. So if students have a hard time understanding, it's probably because it's not being clearly explained. It's not being well explained. So it's why you have other first generation teaching original Jeet Kune. I don't know if you mean that's why you have people who were the peers of Inosano. So you have Steve Golden, you have Jerry Poteet, you have Dan Lee, those type of guys, because they were at the Chinatown school, and they would be considered original Jeet Kune versus Inosano, who would be considered Jeet Kune concepts. So because students have a hard time understanding that other people taught original, they didn't teach concepts, that is not clear. That is not clear, right? Uh, you totally misunderstood what I said. I'm Inosano lineage too. Maybe I did, right? But if you're Inosano lineage and your belief is that Inosano lineage people study a lot, they learn a lot of other things because of the difficulty in understanding Jeet Kune, I feel bad for you. Um, Enzo says, I do not think Bruce Lee would have continued developing JKD as his movies took off. I think JKD ended where he ended, and it was for others to advance it. Yeah, kinda, right? Again, if we start dealing in fantasy and what have you, I could say, well, maybe at some point he would have taken a break from the movies, and come back to LA to help Inosano to work on developing it further. See, right? It's easy. It's real easy to play all kind of imaginary games when it comes to what Bruce Lee may or may not have done. And a lot of it, I think, is just based on how we feel, right? What we think should have happened, or what would make us happy if it had happened. Um, how badly did customs politics hurt the international Titans guest list? Um, I don't think customs politics has any effect on Australia. Uh, and it wasn't customs politics that stopped Germany from coming in. It was a thing with work and time off. Right. Um, at least Dan forces you to expand your horizons. I would disagree. He doesn't force anybody to expand, right? Dan Inosanto doesn't force anybody to do anything. Were you not here earlier when I said, right, that when people demonstrate in front of him, I am not happy with the level, with the quality of their demonstration, but I'm not Dan Inosanto. It's not my school. It's not my seminar. That's just me being full of myself. But I'm not happy with the quality of their demonstration, right? And he doesn't force them to raise the level. So, no, I'm starting to wonder if you were really in a Sano lineage, right? Because he doesn't force anybody to do anything, okay? Via the depth of his total curriculum. I don't know what Inasano lineage you might be. What is his total curriculum? What is the Inasano? Answer me that, Elias Rosner. What is the Inasano curriculum? Dwight is a bit hard on him. Some students don't do well with concepts like duality or philosophy in general. True, but you bend over backwards if they're students. If you care about them understanding, you bend over backwards and you do a hell of a job. You do the best that you can to get to that point. All right, that's that. Okay, I think that is the end of the scrolling, right? And I hope that I didn't annoy you guys too much. Right? Okay, so that's it. I don't think I missed anybody, but I will take a look through again and see what we can do. So I already told you guys next week. Next week, Ulysses Rodriguez will be on with me, and so some of the stuff that he brought up tonight, we will definitely take a look at that next week. All right, let me do some selling. So go to Rebel Gear dot me dot no, I don't even know what it is. What is it? Rebel Gear dot printify.me, rebelgear.printify.me, and that's where you would see stuff like this: the four tenets of Jeet Kune t-shirt, fire and focus coffee mug, fire and focus t-shirt, all that type of stuff. rebelgear.printify.me. It is quite possibly too late. Well, no, you could still register, right? We got a big room. The room's not going to be full. But if you're from outside of Florida, right, it might be pretty expensive to fly, and get hotels and what have you. In fact, I think the block of rooms at the Blue Lagoon Hilton is completely gone. So you'd have to look around for stuff. I mean, there are other hotels on that same avenue, so you could walk and what have you. But titansofjkd.com, if for some reason you are interested and you've just not done anything about it. At paypal.me slash unified MA Miami, paypal.me slash unified MA Miami. Wait, I got to pull this out of there. Whoops. Okay, there we go. Right. PayPal.me slash unified MA Miami. That's where the Jeet Kune Journey Volume 1 is available. PayPal.me slash unified MA Miami. And that is it for today. So next Friday, Ulysses Rodriguez and I will be on. And that's it. You guys have a great weekend, and we will talk soon. Take care. Oh, and stay warm. Saturday into Sunday, Miami's going to be in the 30s. I don't know what's up with that. You know, come on, global warming. We need you to make a reappearance.